All right, looks like we got a steady group here, and we're about 2 minutes past the hour, so I think we can officially go ahead and get started. So, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. Happy Friday. My name is Drew Scammell, and I'm a program associate here at the Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, or IC program at the American Association for Advancement of Science, AAAS. On behalf on AAAS and the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program, I'd like to welcome you to today's NSF Proposal Preparation webinar for Tracks 2 and 3, featuring Noyce Program Lead Dr. Jennifer Ellis and the Noyce Program Co-Lead Dr. James Alvarez. And before I hand it over to our wonderful NSF colleagues, I have a few housekeeping notes I want to quickly go over. This presentation is being recorded, and that recording will be made available in the coming weeks on the NSF Noyce website at nsfnoyce.org. And the slides will be available there as well, because there's some hyperlinks throughout, and you'll be able to click them once they're available. You'll also receive an email with the link to the recording when it's available. Additionally, we have closed captioning for this session, which you can download and view the full transcript by the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And I believe that's all the housekeeping notes from me. So with that, I'll hand it over to our wonderful NSF colleagues for today's webinar on Tracks 2 and 3.
Hi, thank you, Drew, so much for AAAS for arranging for us to have these webinars so we can speak to the field. I am Jennifer Ellis. I am the new lead of the Robert Noyce Teacher Scholarship Program. If those of you who are in the Noyce community and so used to seeing Kathleen, she retired in December. And so I have been co-lead and been thankful to be under her tutelage for a couple of years. And I'm also appreciative to have the help of our co-lead, James Alvarez, who is here. The two of us will tag team today. I'll do the first half and James will bring us home with the second half. So thank you all for joining us and for your interest in tracks 2 and 3. Next slide, please. We first wanted to start with bringing you greetings, not just from the Noyce program, but from the Division of Undergraduate Education that is housed within the Directorate of STEM Education. Noyce is one of the five core programs, sorry, my tongue is tied on a Friday, of DUE. And one of the 5 programs are the ATE program, Advanced Technology Education Program, our Improving Undergraduate STEM Education Program, or IUS. And then we also have IUS HSI, which is focusing on Hispanic serving institutions, Noyce, as well as our NSF scholarships in STEM, which is STEM. And as you can see, Noyce is one of those programs. And we've done webinars this week, and we have done one on improving undergraduate STEM education with a focus on STEM teacher preparation. So if you weren't able to attend that session, the recording and the slides of that one will be available soon. So that may also be of interest to you and your campus to help with really providing more support for your pre-service STEM teachers. Next slide, please. So we wanted to kind of get an idea of who was in the audience. So if you could take this poll, we'll give you about a minute or so, maybe 90 seconds, because I know there's about 5 questions here, but I think a minute for this group of advanced STEM education evaluators should be enough. Okay, Drew, you can, I think I know we still have people probably still trying to click, but this gives James and I a good idea of our audience, and we can kind of scan. We've got a good mix of folks in the room, a lot of education faculty and STEM faculty members. Some of you are currently have awards, so a good mix. So we'll keep our presentation as is, and we have several portions. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. well, this is the kind of the layout of the presentation. We'll go over the solicitation for those of you who weren't able to join us last year, but there's been some changes to the solicitation that may be new to you in your campus that we'll focus on. And then James will do the second half with preparing the proposal, merit review process, and proposal tips, and then we'll just have some additional conversations and recommendations. And as you see, we also have targeted times within the presentation for us to have some Q&A. So we'll go ahead to the next slide. So the deadline for this upcoming submission is August the 27th. It's the last Tuesday of August. And so if you look at a solicitation and you don't see a date for the year in which you're looking, look for a line that says something like that, last Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that. But for Noyce, it's the last Tuesday of August. So if you don't see the year and a specific date, look to see if you see something like that within the solicitation. Okay, next slide. This is our Noyce team. And so we are eager to get your one-pagers, your proposal project summaries that you normally would send to us if you're interested in. Again, we say those things, oh, send us a one-pager. And I know if you're new to the community, you're like, what is that? So really what a one-pager is a maybe 1 or 2 paragraph overview of your idea, what you're trying to propose, your why. And then you have a paragraph or a section or so about intellectual merit, and then another section about your broader impact. And so that essentially is your a rough draft of your project summary that's outlined in the PAPG. And we'll talk about what does the PAPG look like and why we're referring to it as such. But that's what a one-pager is that one-page kind of project summary that you can send to any one of the program directors, and sometimes we use the term program officers interchangeably. And we would love to have a discussion, a 20-30-minute Zoom meeting with you about your idea and to see if Noyce is a good fit for you, and particularly if a track 2 or 3 is a good fit for your campus. But this is our team. Next slide. So Noyce program goals are as follows: to address the critical need for recruiting, preparing, and retaining K-12 STEM teachers and teacher leaders in high-need school districts, support talented STEM undergraduate majors and professionals to become K-12 STEM teachers in high-need school districts, support experienced exemplary K-12 teachers to become teacher leaders in high-need school districts, and support research on the effectiveness and retention of K-12 STEM teachers in high-need school districts. So if you can go to the next slide, those are our major goals. And with those goals, they align with the track. So track 1 is for our undergraduate STEM majors and STEM professionals. And so this could be your undergraduate program, or if you have a post-baccalaureate program, that would be a track 1. Track 2 is for your STEM professionals. They have already earned a bachelor's degree, and their path to licensure is through your master's program. If you have an MAT or another version of a master's degree that will lead to licensure for those STEM professionals, then a track 2 would be something that you may want to consider. Now, as they're earning their certification, they cannot be a teacher of record. They would earn their certification, then become a teacher of record, and then they would, in addition to having that portion of their education paid for by the fellowship, they would also receive a salary supplement or a stipend for 4 years. Track 3 is for our master teaching fellowships. And so those are for the really experienced STEM teachers who are going to be teacher leaders. And this can include some type of professional development. And this comes with a 5-year stipend. Track 4 is our research track. And all of these tracks, if you're still not sure if your institution has the ability to implement one of these tracks, you may want to explore the opportunity that we have in a capacity building project, which could lead to the development of a full proposal and implementation of one of the tracks on your campus. Next slide, please. And the one slide that had the arrows, I said the term high need school district in each one of those boxes. And so to qualify as a high need school district, the district must have at least at least one school that meets one of the following criteria. And so for this, the criteria, my allergies are just lovely today. it lists these two areas here, but it really is for those schools that if you have a Title I school in a school district, that school district will qualify. So the entire school district doesn't have to be a high need. You have to have at least one school in that district that is a high need. And so James will talk later on in the presentation about what does it mean and how do you, what are we looking for in the justification of that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that on the second half of the presentation. Next slide, please. And so I talked about the Noyce tracks. You could, next slide. And their breakdown. And so for track one, it's a 5-year award for a maximum of $1.2 million. The track 2 and 3 is $3 million, and they can be duration of 6 years. And the track 1 is for track 4, I'm sorry, is for $1 million, and the capacity building is now $100,000. And you see the asterisks by each of them, and those asterisks mean if you have a substantial collaboration with a community college or a minority serving institution, you can increase the budget for $250,000 per collaboration. And there's maxes of that for a track 4 for sure. But these are just the overall of the tracks. Next slide, please. And for partnerships and PI requirements. So for your track 2 and 3, the greens are required. The high need school district partner, institution of higher education partner, a nonprofit partner. And as you can see in red, cost sharing is no longer a thing for track 2 and 3, thanks to the CHIPS and Science Act. So we have, I think, until 2026 before we would have to revisit if cost sharing will be back on the table for Noyce. But right now it is not. And so voluntary, it is not allowed on your for your proposal. So if cost sharing was a barrier and you didn't feel comfortable having conversations on your campus because cost sharing was there, please start having those conversations. The PI teams requirements are that you have to have a STEM faculty member, meaning someone who is housed in a STEM department, math, science, engineering, computer science. They need to be housed there, and an education faculty member. And then as you see for capacity building, there's no requirements for that team. So it can be a STEM faculty member, an education faculty member, but it doesn't have to be. Next slide, please. So just wanted to share some highlights. I mentioned that the cost sharing requirement for tracks 2 and 3 is waived. If you are interested or not sure if it's a track 2 or track 1 is the better fit for your campus, track 1s do allow for salary supplements. And for all of the tracks 1, 2, or 3, 1 year for Noyce is 14 months. And so that could be a summer, fall, spring, summer. That would count as a year for Noyce. And I think I covered all 3 of those bullets in that description. And I mentioned previously that capacity building is $100,000. And if you've had a Noyce award, these last 2 may be something that you were like, I think Noyce always did that, right? But you're expected to track your scholars or your fellows beyond the life of the grant. And so that means if you have scholars have a commitment. So if they receive 2 years of funding, they for a track 2, they are expected to teach for 4 years, and for your tracks 2 and 3, the commitments are 4 to 5 years that they would have to be tracked post graduation. So making sure that you have the infrastructure, and it's not you, the PI, you, the institution, have the infrastructure in place to track these students beyond the grant to make sure, because there's an annual report, annual survey that you will be having to submit to their status to ensure that they have fulfilled that commitment. Okay. And I talked about that one. So for track 2, we really wanted to highlight the text that is in bold, that Noyce is not a last cost dollar scholarship. It is a scholarship that should not exceed the cost of attendance, which is different, right? And so in the solicitation, we have that the scholarships amount or the fellowship amount could be $10,000 or more per year. So sometimes when you see a solicitation, you think, oh, NSF only wants us to provide $10,000. $10,000 may be a wonderful assistance to potential fellows on your campus. Or it may just be a love offering on others. And so making sure that you provide a substantial scholarship that would be helpful to your scholars towards their degree program is what we're looking for. We're not looking for a magic number. We're not looking for you to have 800 fellows and thinking like, oh, that's going to impress NSF. Do what makes sense for your campus and make sure you justify that. And that's why we really wanted to kind of take a pause here to say it's $10,000 or more per year to really make sure you understand that we really want you to provide a packet that makes sense for your campus. Next slide. With track 3, just really making sure you understand what the $10,000 needs to look like. And that also goes, that's also with the supplement, the salary supplement, making sure that that salary supplement is something that would be attractive and would help with the retention of master's teaching bonds. Next slide, please. So for capacity building, you're really looking to support for preparation for a future Noyce submission in any other track. And you may not know, do I want to do a track 2 or a track 3? And in full disclosure, I had I was a Noyce PI of 2 track 1s, and I had a capacity building track. And I believe a capacity building award. I believe the initial proposal was for a track 3, but I think by the time we got done, we realized track 3 really wasn't what we were supposed to do. It was a track 2. And so that's the purpose of a capacity building. It's really for you to see the how, the why, the who, the when, the need, the interest, the true capacity, and use evidence-based innovative models and strategies to develop something that would be strong to submit for the full submission. Next slide, or not to submit. Some examples of capacity building project activities are identify or develop models, research designs, or collaborative partnerships to study STEM teacher effectiveness and retention, conduct needs assessments to determine areas of teacher shortages and interest among STEM professionals. We imagine teacher preparation, education, and retention efforts to reflect current school needs. Establish partnerships or methods for recruiting a diverse pool of Noyce recipients, including those from talent pools that have not been fully tapped. And so those are just examples. Next slide, please. And so this is a true or false quiz. Is this active, Drew? Okay, so the poll is up. What say you? So some of this we have not talked about, but it's included in the solicitation. Coco Melon come to a close. Okay. Drew, let's go ahead and close this poll and share the results, and we'll talk this through. Education majors are eligible to receive a Noyce fellowship in track 3 projects. So 60% of you said that is false, but 40% of you actually read the solicitation. So I know we always say they've got to be STEM majors for track 3, this is the only track that is available for truly pre-K or K-12 teachers. So they can be education majors for a track 3 project. I mean, yes, education majors for a track 3 project. If my institution just wants to contribute involuntary cost sharing, I should include that in the budget and budget justification. And 74% of you are probably seasoned NSF folks. And so you realize that the answer is no. Does anybody know in the chat if you want to put where that should be? I won't say yet, but tell me where that information should be. So you can, the involuntary cost sharing, if your institution insists, or you have a collaborating partner who insists, you really think that's going to help strengthen the program, the project, let us know where you think that information should go. And then the last one, capacity building projects are required to have a PI from both a STEM and ed department. And that is false. So it could be either or that doesn't have to be. Did anybody put in the chat where? Should look and see. So yeah, for involuntary cost sharing, that would go in your facilities, that facilities form. Yeah, in the supplementary documents, but the facilities form. Do not put it in the budget and budget justification. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we're opening up the floor to any questions you may have at the time, so you can put them in the chat if you want to unmute your mic or raise your hand and then unmute. That's fine with us too. So for a track 3, so I think how it's reading, it's do they have to be enrolled or can they be enrolled? They don't, if they don't have a master's degree, most of the track 3 programs have it designed for them to receive their master's degree. Keep in mind, your track 2 and 3 can only pay for 1 year of funding towards the completion of that degree. And so if your program cannot be completed in 14 months, then that's going to be something that you, as well as your potential master teaching fellows, would need to take into consideration for their participation in your program.
Jennifer, thank you for your response. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So if the participants for track 3, the master teacher fellows, if they already have master's degree, then they do not have to enroll in the master's degree program. Am I correct?
They already have a master's degree?
If they have already a
Yeah, they do not have to. So there are some track 3 programs that specifically are targeting those teachers who only have master's degrees. So they must have worked with school districts and identified how many, whatever their target of teachers are, already have masters, and there's a big enough pool that they are anticipating that they can pull from to fill their cohorts of teachers who already have a master's degree.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then I see another one. So are we stating that a track 3 can be for elementary education majors? Yes. And they are getting a mathematics concentration specialist. Yes. Yes. That can work. In track 3, does the 1 year of funding for a degree program apply for doctoral programs as well? I'm gonna give you a week. No, it's more for a master's. I don't, from looking at the solicitation, we don't exclude, but we would want them to have a degree that would be completed. And I don't think you can complete a go towards a doctoral program in 14 months. So if the courses cross over and that particular fellow chooses to move on, I think that's fine, but the Noyce funds aren't designed to pay for someone to pay for 14 months of a doctoral program. James, do you think there's something different? Is there an expectation for the PI, who's a jump in, to hold some sort of administrative hat managing the various components of a track 3? If so, can you please elaborate? So I try to mention that a PI can't do it alone, right? And so you need a team. Do you, as a PI, do you need to be an administrator, have administrative hat? No, but do you need to make sure those who are, managing these aspects, are on board to support this initiative? Yes, because the award, again, when NSF provides funding, it is not to a PI, it is to an institution. So the PI should not be managing everything. And it should come across in the proposal that the PI and the institution has the infrastructure to implement this, and that there are clearly people who have been identified that this is their task. And every task does not have, if it was my proposal, Ellis, like, no, you have to make sure it's very clear that that these tasks are spread. Can a master's program be longer than 14 months, even though, yes, the master's program, yeah, nice, James added that. Can adjunct faculty members serve on a PI team? Yes, they can. It just depends on your campus, and what those rules are. But I think now I can pass the baton to James.
Okay. Well, it's great to be with all of you. I'm happy to talk to you a little bit about proposal preparation today. I think that last question about adjunct faculty members, Jennifer answered, but I just wanted to reiterate that it depends on your institution. If your institution allows an adjunct faculty member and it makes sense for them to be a co-PI, then that's up to your institution and how you structure your PI team. So we will, next slide, please. All right, so the first thing, as you think about writing your Noyce your proposal for a Noyce project to NSF, there's sort of two written documents that are kind of central, right? So we have the project summary and we have the 15-page project narrative. So here on the project summary, it's important, it's one page. And in that summary, you want to indicate what track you are going to be pursuing, the names of your institutions and partners, and in particular, your nonprofit organizations. All of your partners need to be named in this paragraph. In this first sentence. Then also, you have an overview of the project that you're proposing. In addition, you have to have a section on intellectual merit. And this is on the one-page project summary, and which actually tells us about how you are identifying how your project is advancing knowledge, or how important this work is, and how well designed is your project. It's kind of a question that it would answer. Then broader impacts is, what is the benefit of this work to STEM education and to society? With all of our Noyce projects, many times, that is a low-hanging fruit in some sense, because the work of the Noyce program in serving high-need schools does naturally fit into that broadening participation component. Next slide. So in the project description, which is the 15-page project narrative, these are the components that your proposal narrative should have. And those of you who are more experienced know that it is helpful to actually have headings that say these things: broader impacts. Well, maybe scope is not one, but project activities. So make it easy for the reviewers who are reviewing your proposal to find the things that they're looking for. In this case, you notice that before I said in the summary page, there's the one page. In the summary page, you have the intellectual merit and broader impacts have to be separate sections. In the 15-page document, you need to have a section on broader impacts. You don't have to have a separate section on intellectual merit. That used to be the case for those of you who are experienced at writing NSF grants, but that's no longer a required section of the 15-page document. So in your 15-page narrative, you do want to talk about what are the project activities? How are you going to support those activities? The scope of your project. So if you're having a track 3 project, are you going to recruit in 2 cohorts? Maybe one cohort has master's degrees and another cohort doesn't have. Are teachers who will be working toward a master's degree. So explaining what your scope is, and in tandem though, what is your recruitment plan? How are you going to select people? So many times we want to see also that that you have your partners in place and the structures in place so that there's evidence that you'll be able to recruit the numbers of teachers that you are planning to recruit, and also that somehow your selection will bring in a representative sample of the teachers in the area, in the schools, and that will serve the needs of the students. Your project description has to have an evaluation plan. How are you going to know whether or not you did what you said you were going to do, right? So your evaluation plan, and an evaluator needs to have been identified, an independent evaluator. You should describe how you're going to administer your project. Having some kind of, you could have a chart, a table, a description, but it needs to be clear. How is this going to work, and who's going to administer these different components? Your dissemination plan is also something that's important. Many times we think of conferences or having a website or having other kinds of components for dissemination. Be creative about that, but then also it's something you have to address. How are you going to disseminate either the findings from your program or the ways in which you are establishing sort of structures that perhaps other programs can replicate? It's important, this teacher, in particular for track 3, you're thinking about teacher leaders, right? So how are you going to be developing them as teacher leaders? So you'll be recruiting people in with master's degrees, potentially, right? If that's one of your groups, but how are you then going to support them to become teacher leaders in their schools? In your narrative, you want to talk a little bit about your collaborations and make it and communicate to the reviewers the kinds of ways in which you're going to work together with your collaborators, and give an idea, right, to the reviewers. Remember, you're trying to convince the review panel that you do have a meaningful collaboration set up that will support your carrying out your project. The cost sharing is not required for track 2 and track 3, as Jennifer said. NSF actually in all, other than this program in the past, right? So in many programs, you can't put in cost sharing, right? Because that's sort of an issue of equity. But if you had some other kind of involuntary cost sharing, like perhaps it's some other kind of configuration, like Jennifer said, it would go in your facilities and equipment description, but that's not required, right? Results from NSF prior support, that is a separate section in your 15-page narrative, and that's required by the PAPG. So the proposal guide requires that all NSF proposals have a section on results from prior support. If you've had more, and this is your NSF prior support in the last 5 years. If you haven't had NSF prior support in the last 5 years, you still need the section. You would have to write results from prior support and just put NA, not applicable. So we know that you didn't forget it. And if you have had support, and you've had more than one grant funded, this is for all your senior personnel that you're going to have to list this. If you've had more than one grant, you only have to talk about one. Okay. Next slide. If you're working on a capacity building project, then that proposal narrative is just 10 pages long. Again, you have to have a section on broader impacts. What's your rationale for your project needs to be covered there. So if you've identified that perhaps you want to explore working toward a track 2 or a track 3, then what's your rationale for that? What's your plan and the partnerships that you hope to gain, or the partnerships that you hope to cultivate or call upon, or partnerships that you have for this endeavor. Then also, how are you going to know whether or not you achieved what you said you were going to achieve? So we do need to talk about what are your how are you going to assess your project outcomes? Again, results from prior support. It's a required section from the PAPG. And then also some details about how you're going to manage your project. That's it. Yeah. So in this case, though, for the capacity building, you're trying to make a case for, or you're structuring a project that will lead toward one of the tracks, or try to explore which track, say, for instance, like Jennifer mentioned on her own capacity building project, that they decided that although they were thinking about track 3, that track 2 ended up being the one that they settled on. Next slide. So some additional requirements of the for the track 2 and 3 project. So there are actually, in this case, you do need 4 letters of collaboration, or of commitment. You need a letter from each of the deans of the colleges. So for instance, the dean from a STEM college or school, and a letter from an education college or school, or whatever the equivalent is at your particular institution. So those dean letters would be from letters of commitment. So that means that they're going to be talking about the specific things that they're committing to do that are related to your particular project. Now, this is different from, if you've written other NSF proposals where the letters of commitment tend to be that you're just using the standard language in the PAPG. These need to go beyond that. Okay. And for the superintendent letter in particular, the superintendent has to certify, right, or say that they will not reduce the base salary for the fellows, right? And then you also need a letter from the principal of a partnering school. So they also need to verify that they're a high needs school district. Okay, so in the superintendent letter, for instance, if you were to submit a proposal and the superintendent letter didn't have that statement in there, we might ask you to get a letter that does say that, right? Because it needs to say that they will not reduce those salary supplements. And also for here, I think we're missing the letter that you need a letter from your nonprofit organization also. Okay. Capacity building projects don't require these letters, but certainly if you do obtain them, they need to be letters of commitment, and those would be those are helpful, but they're not required. And I see here that we say they're required if you're requesting collaboration incentives. So if you have a collaboration incentive, meaning that you're getting more than the minimum, than the amount for having some other collaboration with an MSI or something like that, then you would need a letter there. So in your supplementary documents section, you have your letters of collaboration, your biosketch of your independent evaluator, your postdoctoral mentoring plan, and your data management plan. The data management plan is in the PAP, is described in the PAPG. So we do want to know, what kinds of data you're collecting, and how you're planning to protect that data, and how you're planning, your plans for that, and that's specified in the PAPG. All right. Next slide. Okay, so we'll go on to merit review. Okay, so I see a hand up. Maybe I'll wait till the question and answer section session, and then we will, or Jennifer, do you have a question? Jennifer Miller, I see your hand up. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I just wanted, can you give an example of what typically the deans would put in their letters? I'm just taking notes. So I was wondering, like, can you be more specific as to, I know it's not general, so can you give me some examples of, like, did they put release time? Like, what did they put in the actual letter?
So that's tough to say. I think that's a conversation you can have with the program officer once you do decide on where you want to go. But I think the idea is that the dean wouldn't give the generic letter of commitment, but that they would offer, if there are components of your project that require some kind of support from space, from like you're having teachers come up to work on your campus, to do a leadership seminar on campus, or other things like that. How are they going to support how are they committed to supporting what you decide to do for your project? So that varies from project to project. So I hope that helps some, Jennifer.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. All right, so intellectual merit. So the merit review, right? As we know at NSF, all of our proposals are evaluated for the way in which they meet the two NSF merit review criteria. One is intellectual merit, and the other is broader impacts. So the intellectual merit review criteria is what is the potential for the proposed activity to advance knowledge and understanding within its own field or across different fields. And the broader impacts is what is the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society or advance specific desired societal outcomes. So the next slide. Sometimes when we're thinking about our Noyce projects, we may feel like, well, it's a struggle to think about how am I going to advance knowledge, right? Because in many ways we're doing it's hands-on, bringing people into schools, but you can certainly learn something. I think that you can think about how creative is your plan put together. Well, what does your network look like that you're trying to structure, depending on whether you're doing a track 2 or a track 3. Maybe you have a very creative recruitment plan for your track 2. Perhaps in your track 3, the way in which you structure your leadership components is particularly creative or particularly transformative. So in those ways, you can think about how are your proposed activities advancing knowledge. Well, you can think and the advancement of knowledge also is in the way that they're structured, in the way that you carry them out. So that goes along with the second bullet when it's like, is your plan for carrying them out well reasoned, well organized? Is it based on a sound rationale? Do you give good reasons for the way that you structured your program? Also, is your evaluation plan, or the way you plan to assess what you did, is that structured in a way that gives the reviewers confidence that you will be able to determine some of the essential successes from your project? Another component of this is how well qualified is your team to work on this project, and then and also the organizations that you put together, and then also what resources do you have available to you? What resources for carrying out the plan do you talk about, or do you mention that may be something that adds to the capacity for you to be, or the potential for you to meet the two NSF review criteria? Next slide. Some general tips for success. I think it's important, if you're working on one of these projects, is to think about what are you aware of some ongoing projects that might be similar to the one that you're planning to propose, and are you aware of the current research literature and advances in the field? So you do want to cite the literature in your 15-page narrative. And then also make it clear that the strategies that you are looking at are research-based or grounded in the field, but also grounded in more recent recent advances. For instance, if you took a particular idea from 50 years ago that's been debunked and then tried to use, I mean, I know that you wouldn't do that, but if you did, then that would not review very well. Include timelines and benchmarks in your plan for independent feedback. You want to propose a cost-effective and high-impact project. So in that sense, it's like the scope. Remember, we talked about scope before. So the scope of your project, you want to think about what will it take to do this project? And you want it to be cost-effective, but you also want it to be realistic, right? That you know, when you try to cut too many corners, then it's problematic for the review in that it comes across as you're not understanding what it will take to do your project. So there's that fine line between being cost-effective but you also want whatever costs that you are putting into this project that they're going to have a high impact. Make sure that you have addressed the details and sections of your in all the sections of your proposal. Many times we might see, because I know sometimes if you work on these collaboratively, that there's an unevenness in the narrative or in the budget justification, and so then there may be conflicting information. So make sure you've looked at it for its continuity and for the being consistent. When you have, if you're resubmitting a proposal that's been declined, or make sure that you look at the reviewer's feedback. Remember that our reviewers will be different every time. So we do bring in expert reviewers in different areas, which include from a STEM discipline, from an education research perspective, from an evaluator's perspective, a teacher. And so make sure that you think about what they've asked you to do. Many times when you have, if you've been declined, it's a good idea to talk to the program officer who signs your who is the person you got the note from on your declination letter, because they're typically the person who ran the panel, and then talk to them about your proposal to get some insights about what you might need to change. But you keep in mind though that every year there's a different panel that reviews these, right? It is a good idea though to speak to someone to get some clarification if you're not clear, and give you some extra insights on your decline proposal. When you're thinking about your writing, put yourself in the reviewer's place. So if you were reviewing your own proposal, what would you think is missing? Many times it helps to have somebody else read your proposal, because many times when we're immersed in our writing, we may we may not even see that we're missing some points. Provide supporting details to substantiate your identified partnerships. So if you say, okay, well, X corporation is going to be our X nonprofit is going to be our nonprofit partner, and then you never really talk about how they're going to be integrated in your project, that would not look well, right? You know what I mean? So you want to make sure that you substantiate the partnerships in your proposal. I already said this about aligning your budget request with the scope of your work. And again, call or email the Cognizant Noyce program officers. So if you are thinking about a project, you can write up, as Jennifer mentioned, the one-pager, and send that in, and you can talk to someone. All right, next page. Okay, now here we are for the question and answers. So let's see. Okay, so it looks like, yeah, so on our slide about the letters, you do need a letter from your nonprofit partner for the track 2 and track 3. What may be some examples of nonprofit partners? What is their role? So I would just encourage you to go back to the solicitation and look at that. But if you're, for instance, some nonprofit partners might be a museum. a science museum, might be some other philanthropic organization in your community. So there's lots of examples of that. You can also go to the NSF award search and search for other Track 3 projects that have been funded, and then their nonprofit organizations are listed. So that will give you another idea. Does a nonprofit, okay, so let me see, there's a lot of questions here. Can you have multiple nonprofit partners? Yes, you can have multiple nonprofit partners. Is there a person to reach out to if there are proposal questions, or should we reach out to you? You can reach out to either Jennifer or I, but also there's a list. If you pull up the Noyce solicitation, you can reach out to anyone from the Noyce team. Okay. Does nonprofit partner receive funding from the grant? That is something that you can decide as a project. So if it makes sense to receive some funding, then that would be fine, right?
And I will say that if they're doing substantial work and there is no funding, then that may be cause for concern. Or during the review process so you don't want to question, you don't want that part questioned. So if it makes sense for them to be paid and they're providing a service and there's someone who can be paid, then include them in the budget.
Right. So for instance, if you have if they're on an advisory board or something like that, and your advisory and the advisory team meets regularly and you're compensating others for serving on that, then you can certainly also include that.
Yeah, if they're providing some professional development, things of that nature, then I'll definitely include them. So a lot of times, nonprofit partners have an education lens. And so that's one of the reasons why you're partnering with them. And so they can do something that you can't. And so typically but they don't have to be, but I didn't want anybody to get the impression that because it's nonprofit and we're adding, it's a we're not forcing you to collaborate. It needs to make sense for your project to help enhance it.
Right. Yeah, you want to make sure that they're integrated into your project. So this is, I guess it depends on different factors, but on your experience, how many members do you mean? So Debay, do you mean team members, like on the PI team?
Yes, team members. So
you mean on the, okay. I mean, there are the requirements, right? That you need at least one STEM faculty and one education person. But then the size of your team from NSF standard, NSF allows you to have 5 co-PIs, right? But that just depends on your project. So how you decide your project. I don't know that there's an ideal number.
So if we include like some staff members who can coordinate with the school district and just make sure that the teachers' persistence record tracking, then should that person be on the team, or can we just hire someone and do not specify in the proposal?
I think that's a specific enough question that you probably want to meet with the program officer to talk about it. But I think that if I understand your question correctly, if you are, it depends on the nature of the partnership. So therefore it depends on your project, right? But if I heard you correctly, you're saying that they're tracking somehow the teachers in the school district.
Yes.
Then, many times when we think about the PI team and the senior personnel, that's sort of the leadership component, but then you also have other personnel on the project. And so I would encourage you then, based upon your own structure, that you think about what makes most sense to structure in this case. It sounds like from what you said, if what you're hiring their role is to track certain things, track data that depending on the nature of that, it would be depending on the nature and the way that they interact with the PI team. It could be a PI or it could be a senior personnel or a project manager of some kind. So that depends.
Okay,
I keep giving more details, even though I said you really should talk to someone. You really should talk to someone about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
There's one question up here, and you might have mentioned it, but would faculty that have no grant experience still have a chance? Yes. So we're looking for folks who are new to Noyce. We want to expand the Noyce community, so please don't allow misperceptions about NSF jade your perspective about applying. Please apply. We're really looking to see, can people do the work? So if you are new to Noyce, and everybody on your team may be new, but you really clearly explain your level of expertise, the reason why you're the best person to lead this particular proposal and your team, and it's very clear what everybody is doing, then yes, please, we want strong teams who have demonstrated that you have the infrastructure to implement what it is that you're having. The biggest, I guess, concern just for any Noyce programs are, do you have participants, right? And so we don't want to award funding to people that are using this as a way to create a program. And there's no students there. So we give you the money and give them the money, then the students will come. No, we're believing that you have these scholars, these fellows there, and you're just using this funding to really help enhance that, and not to grow students that aren't even in existence. So that's, if you're worried about concerns, that's more of a concern than have you ever had an NSF grant.
Right, and I think that when you think about who are the PIs and who are the co-PIs, who's doing the work, right? And so even if you're all new, right? Now, what you may want to do in terms of for actually writing the proposal, if you have someone experienced at your institution, have them be your second, read over what you did, right? But it's not a requirement. Like Jennifer says, we are happy to fund people who have never been funded before. But you got to attend to all of the components in the solicitation, and then also what the people who should be the PIs and the co-PIs should be the people that are doing the work. Okay, let's see. So
I know we're at the hour, but James and I are prepared to stay a little bit later, and we do have a few other things that we can share, but we'll stay, into overtime. So don't feel that you have to, I know some of you have a hard stop, but if you don't have a hard stop and you have additional questions, please unmute, put them in the chat, but we'll stay a little bit longer if needed. So we really want to make sure your concerns are addressed, or you can feel free to email us as well.
Okay. And I guess Drew, you can go up 2 slides. Yeah. So there's some links. You can go ahead and advance that. You advance it one more time, then they'll have that last. Are those?
And for those of you who are still here, we have one more webinar about the research experiences and STEM settings. And it's kind of like, if you're familiar with NSF's RET, research experience for teachers, or even the REU, the research experiences for undergraduates, it's kind of a mix of that, right? So you can create a research experience in STEM settings for pre-service and/or in-service teachers. And so we'll talk more about that, more about supplemental funding and conference proposals and things of that nature in our very last session for these webinar pushes. So thank you for coming. like I said, James and I can hang out around for a little bit longer if you have more questions.
So someone asked, would elementary STEM projects be considered? For the track 3, you can have elementary teachers, and you want them to be their focus in the leadership is on their STEM, right? But you can have elementary teachers. Yeah.
So, and Lena, I'm not sure if you were referring to the research experience in STEM settings. So yes, if that's what you were.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure, but if that's the case, yes.
I think I don't see very many other questions.
Well, thank you all, Drew. If you want to truly bring us home, you can.
Yeah.
Oh, I see one in the chat. And a tenured faculty member from a statistics department who is a master's in STEM. Yes. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, Drew.
No.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, if there's no more questions, I don't want to keep people too late, especially if where you're calling in from is as beautiful as it is, as the weather is beautiful as it is right now in Baltimore. But before we go, I just want to thank our NSF colleagues, the rest of the IC team, and all of you who are able to join and participate today. As Jennifer and James mentioned, we have one more webinar in this series, and I know that I've seen some familiar names, so thank you all who have joined throughout the week. So next week on May 1, which is Wednesday, from 3 to 4 p.m., we'll be talking about those research experiences in STEM settings and additional funding opportunities with Noyce. And my colleague Betty put in a survey link, which we put a survey link in the chat, and we'll be sending that via email as well. And that survey should only take a few minutes, but we really appreciate your feedback, and it helps as we prepare for these series more in the future. And once more, a recording of the presentation will be posted on the website and emailed to you in the coming days. That website is nsfnoyce.org, and the slides will be available there very soon. And those will be shared via the recording email as well once that goes out in about a week or two. And with that, thank you all so much for joining us today. James and Jennifer, thank you so much for your expertise. Hope everyone takes care, and we see some of you next week, and enjoy the weekend. Thanks, everyone.